Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Avalanche, in which the Sharks managed to win 5-2. The Sharks finished their season series against the Avalanche 3-0 and will move up to 101 points, which will be good for second place in the entire Western Conference, meaning they will have home ice in every single series that they do play in the West, except if they are to face off against the Calgary Flames, which could potentially, of course, happen in the second round. The Avalanche, on the other hand, will be facing off against the Calgary Flames in the first round, and I guess it would be in the Sharks' best interest that the Avalanche win that series with how much success the Sharks have had versus the Avalanche so far this year. This, of course, was game 82, so our next game for the Sharks will be in the playoffs. Of course, we already know they're going to be facing off against the Golden Knights, and many people are excited, but we did have to play this game first. Rather meaningless for both teams. If the Sharks were looking to secure second place in the Western Conference, the Avalanche, once the Dallas Stars won earlier today, I don't think they were playing for anything. I don't even know if they were playing for anything, even if the Stars lost. I'm not 100% sure. But game starts out, and the Sharks once again usually give up that first goal. In the first few minutes of the game, it's Tyson Jost this time. Joakim Ryan caught sort of walking around, couldn't separate Jost from the puck for a few seconds. Martin Jones completely losing track of this puck, and the Avalanche lead 1-0, but the Sharks respond well. Brent Burns gets another goal, his 16th, and Evander Kane gets his 30th, so he hits the 30-goal mark, I believe, for the second time in his career, and for the first time in a long time for him, but something like 8 or 9 years, and the Sharks had a 2-1 lead at the end of the first period. Come second period, once again, Nathan MacKinnon earlier on, about a couple minutes in, gets the goal to tie it up. I think the Sharks should try and push, Doug Wilson should try and push the other GMs at the GM meeting to maybe cut down periods to 15-minute periods each, because the Sharks seemingly can't perform in the first 5 minutes of each period. However, as the second period goes on, the Sharks are playing some pretty good hockey. Kevin Labanc gets a quite the lucky bounce, which is something we haven't said about the Sharks in a few games, really. And the Sharks hold a 3-2 lead going into the third period. And the third period starts off well for the Sharks. And eventually Gustav Nyquist adds his 22nd of the year, makes it 4-2. And at that point, the Avalanche turn it on. And it's something weird with the Avalanche. Every single game the Sharks have played this season against the Avalanche haven't even looked that great up until the point where the Sharks have like a lead by a couple of goals, at which point the Avalanche completely turn it on. In the last 9 minutes, the Avalanche trying to push to just get within one even, but it doesn't end up happening, and it's Michael Haley, of all players, who tops it off with that empty net goal, his second of the year, and the Sharks claim the final win of this regular season, 5-2. First thing to talk about would be Martin Jones, and the first goal wasn't great, him losing track of that puck and all of that traffic. While it was difficult to follow, certainly you'd like to see him be able to do that. He got beat on the breakaway by Nathan MacKinnon on a nice play by him, a nice display of speed, but otherwise, and what was probably most encouraging, and many Sharks fans probably felt this was an extremely encouraging sign, was in the last few minutes of the third period, I said the Avalanche really turned it on, and Martin Jones managed to shut the door at every single opportunity, making some great saves, basically showing flashes of what we have seen from playoff Martin Jones, which is a great sign in the fact that these were the last 9 minutes of the entire regular season. If Martin Jones can play like he did in that final half of the third period in that series against the Vegas Golden Knights, the Sharks will have a great chance of winning that series. Now, of course, Jones had not had very good games in the past few, so it's nothing like you should believe that he's going to be able to carry the good 10 minutes into the series, but it is a good sign that his most recent play at this point will be remembered for being very, very good, as he kept this 2-goal lead alive as the Sharks defense sort of floundered a bit in those last few minutes. On to Erik Carlsson, who did return for this game. He said back in early March that he would like to get games at the end of the season to try and get back up to speed before the playoffs, and this was the one game he managed to get. Carlsson actually looked quite good. I liked he continued to show those great signs that Erik Carlsson just always has, some great vision and passing and everything like that. You could definitely tell there was something off there, which was that groin injury. There were a couple times where he didn't really display the speed that you would necessarily expect Erik Carlsson to do at certain moments. His penalty in the third period was a big example of that. He sort of caught flat-footed. Maybe that wouldn't happen if he wasn't dealing with some sort of injury like he is doing at the moment. But it's clear, very, very clear, that he is the much better option than the player that the Sharks kicked out of the lineup for him, Tim Heed, as Erik Carlsson was still very, very useful tonight. And going into the playoffs, maybe these last few days of rest will help him even more, and he should be at the very least 80 to 90% going in against that series for the Vegas Golden Knights. Onto the lineup, as the Sharks were looking to establish what that lineup would be going into the playoffs. However, with the sort of injury to Timo Meier, who has mostly been confirmed to actually be back for that Game 1 against the Golden Knights, the Sharks couldn't completely lock down what they'd like to do. First, I'll talk about the defense, as Middleton ends up getting subbed out in this game for Joakim Ryan. So as expected, the Sharks decide to go with a bit more of a experienced player, as not extremely experienced, but Ryan does have playoff games under his belt, while Middleton only had 3 or 4 regular season games in total in his career. But I thought it was interesting to see what DeBoer actually did with the defensive pairings. Instead of going with Burns Ryan and then going like Dylan Carlson or Vlasic Carlson and Dylan Braun or Vlasic Braun, he decides to put Vlasic with Burns and then Ryan with Braun. And this is mostly what I call the play Ryan about 6 minutes a night strategy, as Burns and Carlson, both players in the playoffs who can easily log over 25 minutes. But Braun and Vlasic, certainly no strangers to playing around 20 minutes, over 20 minutes. Dylan can definitely get up there as well. And so Joakim Ryan just playing a couple shifts in the first, a couple shifts in the second, and depending on, how the game is at that point in the third period, a couple shifts there or maybe no shifts, and just getting in general 6-7 minutes a night probably won't be the worst thing in the world, especially in the playoffs. While in the regular season, it's probably not a sustainable thing for 82 games. In the playoffs, you're only playing about 25 if you go far. And so I really think that the Sharks will probably look to do something like that. At least in my opinion, that might be in the best interest, because while Ryan was somewhat better in this game, there were still certainly moments, especially on that first goal from Tyson Jost, where he just looked completely lost. For the forwards, we saw Donskoy draw back into the lineup because of the fact that Timo Meier wasn't there, and Donskoy actually had a ton of grade A opportunities, just couldn't bury any of them. I mean, if you were to take all the high danger chances Donskoy had and converted them into goals, he probably would have had like a hat trick or maybe even 2 hat tricks in this game. That didn't end up being the case. He couldn't convert on a single one, but it was some good signs of what we saw from him. But Haley also had a decent game, obviously not with the chances that Donskoy have, but that's to be expected with the fact that Donskoy is playing with Couture and Pavelski while Haley is playing with Goodrow and Carlson. But it'll definitely be very interesting to see what DeBoer does once Meier does return, if he will just keep Donskoy and put him with Goodrow and Carlson, or if he will keep Haley. If I were a betting man, I would probably say Michael Haley draws into the lineup for Game 1 and sees where that goes. If Haley needs to be a factor in that one, I could see Donskoy potentially, and then seeing if it's going to be really physical to swap Donskoy out for Haley just right at the start. But I would say that Haley is the player in the lineup for that Game 1 against the Golden Knights. Other loose end to tie up, as the Sharks, of course, finished their 82-game regular season. Brent Burns with a goal and an assist tonight puts his point total up to 83, which is the most by a defenseman in over 20 years, I believe. Erik Carlsson, the closest one a few years ago, had 82 points, but Brent Burns passing that by the single point as he earned that assist on the empty net Michael Haley goal. Other things, 4 30-goal scorers for the San Jose Sharks this season. That would be Hurdle, Pavelski, Kane, and Meier. Kane and Meier both just barely getting 30. A ton of career years for the Sharks this season. Logan Couture, Tomas Hurdle, Kevin Labanc, Marcus Sorensen, Gustav Nyquist, technically a career year, even though most of that was with Detroit. Brent Burns, so a great season all around offensively, points-wise, for a lot of these Sharks players. I believe they end up finishing with 60-point scorers since Nyquist joined those ranks. Vander Kane could have very easily gotten 60 points if he wasn't injured. Erik Carlsson could have potentially gotten 60 points if he didn't miss a good 30 games this year. And so just an extremely successful season offensively. Most of the troubles the Sharks have had this season, and what has made this season somewhat inconsistent at times, where they started poorly and they have somewhat ended poorly as well, has been the defense and the goaltending. And we'll see if that does pick up, because that will do it for this final review of the regular season 18-19 NHL season for the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks will be back in action on either Wednesday or Thursday, as they will face off for the Golden Knights in Game 1, a potential 7-game series. And all of the playoff matchups are set. this is still looking in my books like the top matchup in the first round. Maybe a bit biased, as of course the Maple Leafs Boston Bruins series does exist. But if you're a hockey fan or a Sharks, of course if you're a Sharks fan you're going to watch it. But if you're a hockey fan, this is probably the series that you want to watch. If you're choosing between two late games, let's say the Calgary Flames series and this one, and the Sharks Vegas one, that's definitely the one you should have on your TV. Class dismissed.